President-elect Donald Trump has unveiled plans to impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada, citing concerns related to illegal immigration and the trafficking of drugs, particularly fentanyl, across the US-Canada border. These tariffs are set to remain in place until Canada takes steps that the Trump administration deems satisfactory in addressing these issues. In response, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has sharply criticized the proposed tariffs, warning that they could harm both economies by driving up consumer prices and disrupting trade. Trudeau dismissed Trump's suggestion of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state, calling it a distraction from the real issues that need attention. The U.S. and Canada have long maintained a robust trade relationship, with bilateral trade in goods and services totaling around $900 billion annually. Both countries are each other's largest trading partners, and their economies are deeply integrated through agreements such as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. Previous tariff actions, such as those imposed on steel and aluminum in 2018, led to retaliatory measures that strained relations but were eventually resolved through negotiations. However, the newly proposed tariffs have raised alarms among business leaders and economists, who fear disruptions to supply chains, higher consumer costs, and adverse effects on financial markets. The Canadian dollar has already begun to weaken in the wake of these tensions, reflecting investor concerns. But Canada is not the only country that could be affected by these tariffs. Trump has also announced plans to target other major U.S. trading partners, including Mexico, China, and the European Union, EU, with the aim of addressing trade imbalances, illegal immigration, and national security concerns. Trump's tariff plans include a 25% tariff on all imports from both Mexico and Canada, which he justifies as a response to illegal immigration and the influx of drugs, especially fentanyl, entering the United States. He has made it clear that these tariffs will remain in place until both Mexico and Canada take tangible action to address these problems. In addition to the tariffs on Mexico and Canada, Trump's administration has outlined plans for a 10% levy on all Chinese imports. This is part of a broader effort to reduce trade deficits and curb the flow of illicit substances, as well as to address ongoing concerns over China's trade practices, including accusations of intellectual property theft and currency manipulation. The tariffs imposed on China in 2018 had already caused significant disruptions, with costs rising for U.S. businesses and consumers. Analysts predict that this new round of tariffs could have similar effects, further escalating tensions. Trump has also set his sights on the European Union. In a recent post on Truth Social, he accused the EU of engaging in unfair trade practices, particularly by imposing higher tariffs on U.S. goods than the U.S. imposes on EU imports. He has proposed a 25% tariff on key EU exports to the U.S., including automobiles, wine, and luxury goods. The EU, which is one of the largest trading partners of the U.S., has warned of retaliatory measures if these tariffs are enacted. Germany, in particular, could be severely impacted, as its automotive industry depends heavily on exporting high-value vehicles to the U.S. European leaders, including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, have made it clear that they would not hesitate to retaliate against such measures. Additionally, Trump has floated the idea of imposing a 100% tariff on imports from BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, as part of an unprecedented measure aimed at addressing trade imbalances and national security issues. Such tariffs, if implemented, could have far-reaching consequences, potentially destabilizing global trade. Economists warn that this could provoke widespread retaliatory actions, leading to global economic instability and affecting multiple industries, from agriculture to technology. In response to these looming tariffs, Canada is preparing an extensive retaliation plan. Unlike the targeted counter-tariffs from the 2018 trade dispute, this retaliation could involve nearly all U.S. products sold to Canada. While in 2018, Canada focused on specific items, like bourbon whiskey from Republican-leaning regions, this time the retaliation could involve a broader list of U.S. exports. There is speculation that iconic products, such as Florida orange juice, could face tariffs once again. According to sources within the Canadian government, the goal is to match U.S. tariffs dollar for dollar. However, fully mirroring the U.S. tariffs may not be feasible, given the broad scope of the potential tariffs. Nonetheless, Prime Minister Trudeau's administration is exploring all available options to put significant economic pressure on U.S. exporters while avoiding a full-scale trade war. Trump's recent comments threatening Canada with economic force and suggesting that it should become the 51st state have generated considerable backlash in Canada. Prime Minister Trudeau responded by dismissing these remarks as distractions from the real economic harm caused by Trump's proposed tariffs, which could lead to higher consumer prices across the board. Canada is the largest foreign buyer of U.S. goods, importing $320 billion worth of products in the first 11 months of the previous year, close to the $341 billion purchased by the European Union. However, Canada's retaliation could have significant consequences on its own economy. Economists predict that full-scale retaliation could reduce Canada's GDP by up to 5.6% over several years. As a strategic response to these potential tariffs, Canada is considering implementing export taxes on key commodities, such as oil, uranium, and potash. Canada is a major supplier of crude oil to the United States, and energy products make up about 30% of its exports to the U.S. In early 2025, U.S. imports of Canadian crude hit a record high, emphasizing the critical role that Canadian oil plays in U.S. energy production. Export taxes on oil could disrupt this supply chain and lead to higher energy costs for American consumers and businesses. Canada is also striving to become the world's largest producer of uranium, with companies like Cameco planning to increase production to meet the rising global demand for nuclear energy. The U.S. relies heavily on Canadian uranium for its nuclear power plants, and export taxes could impact the availability and cost of this vital resource. Similarly, Canada's potash exports, which are crucial for U.S. agriculture, could also face new taxes, leading to higher costs for American farmers and potentially increasing food prices. The metals industry could also be impacted, particularly the steel and aluminum sectors. Canada has been a major player in the global metals market, with key exports like aluminum and steel being targeted by the U.S. in previous tariff disputes. While the steel sector may be less affected this time, the aluminum industry could still be at risk, particularly if new tariffs are imposed on Canadian exports. Despite the potential negative impact on Canada's economy, the government is exploring strategic ways to respond to U.S. tariffs while avoiding a full-blown trade war. Former Canadian trade negotiator Steve Verrill suggested that export taxes could be a useful tool in negotiations if the U.S. follows through with broad tariffs. However, there remains uncertainty about how to best proceed, as the clarity of Trump's trade policies is still uncertain. Trudeau's administration is considering whether to release a list of potential retaliatory tariffs before Trump's inauguration, but officials are weighing the risks of such a move. In light of these potential tariffs, both the U.S. and Canada face significant economic risks. The failure of U.S. tariff policies could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the two countries but for the global economy. There are indications that Trump may reconsider the breadth of his tariff plans, particularly given the potential damage to both economies. Reports suggest that he may narrow the scope of the tariffs to focus only on critical imports related to national security or economic interests, such as defense, medical supplies, or energy production. This shift in approach could be an attempt to mitigate the economic fallout and avoid a full-scale trade war with Canada. However, Trump has publicly denied any plans to scale back his tariff proposals, maintaining that they are essential for the economic prosperity of the United States. This contradiction highlights the uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policy and the complex dynamics at play in the global economy. While tariffs are often used as a tool in trade disputes, their implementation can lead to unintended consequences that may outweigh their benefits. Only time will tell whether Trump's bold approach will lead to meaningful reforms in global trade relations or whether it will cause significant harm to the U.S. economy and its global standing. The U.S.-Canada relationship, which has evolved over centuries, has been characterized by periods of conflict, but it has also become one of the most deeply integrated and cooperative partnerships in the world. From early conflicts like the War of 1812 to more recent trade agreements like NAFTA and the USMCA, the relationship has been defined by a mix of cooperation and competition. Despite occasional trade disputes, both countries have found ways to resolve their differences and maintain a mutually beneficial relationship. However, the current trade tensions, fueled by Trump's proposed tariffs and harsh rhetoric, threaten to unravel this long-standing partnership. The stakes are high, with the future of a $900 billion bilateral trade relationship hanging in the balance. As both countries prepare for the possibility of a trade war, the global economy watches closely, awaiting the next move in this escalating dispute.